Well, welcome back to Focus Today. July 21st, 2002 should have been the day Craig Demartino died. That's what it says in his book, but he didn't, and he's here with us live. He's written the book called After the Fall. Craig, thanks for being with us. I know that's one of the more unusual introductions you probably had, but also I don't normally read this on the back of books. The day that somebody should have died, and I know you've told your story a whole lot, but I'm going to ask you to tell us one more time what got you to where you are today because of this particular date.
That's funny because I don't think anyone has introduced me that way, so that was awesome.
Well, I found it. I'm finding it compelling because I want to know what happened on July 21st, and I know there's stuff that happened before then too. But tell us what went on.
Well, on July 21st in 2002, I'd been a climber for about 13 years at that point, and I was just going climbing with a really good friend of mine up in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is near my home here in Colorado. And we went up, and we're going to do this one climb in particular, and as we walked up to the cliff, we just kind of were communicating as climbers do, hey, let's do it this way, and we had a plan, but we didn't really communicate the plan. We just kind of spoke very loosely about it, and so I tied into the rope, headed off up the cliff, and about 100 feet later, I got to a ledge, a small ledge about 3 inches wide by, I don't know, a couple feet long, and clipped into an anchor there, and got ready to be lowered back to the ground. And just because we had miscommunicated on the walk up there, he thought he was going to come up to the ledge and then go down. We would rappel together. I thought he was just going to lower me to the ground. When I pulled into the anchor to be lowered, I got accidentally dropped 100 feet. So for your listeners, 100 feet it's basically a 10-story office building. Wow. So kind of stepping up to the edge of a 10-story office building and then falling backwards off of that.
And totally unexpected. You weren't ready for that at all. I mean, you were expecting him to be letting you down somewhat easily. I want to find out all the aftermath of all of this, but you've been a climber for quite a while, and a rock climber is what we're talking about. You pretty experienced at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I had climbed all over the world. I wasn't a professional climber at that point. I was just doing it all the time. I had started climbing at all things a bachelor party. I actually talk about that in the book. So I kind of came into it through the back door, but then it resonated with me. And so I had climbed all over the world. I had climbed every different kind of rock climbing you can do. There's many different facets that we all do. And it was just something I was super passionate about and wanted to pursue my whole life. I didn't really ever think I'd get hurt doing it. Okay, so now we've left you plummeting down 10 stories. What happened? As I was coming down, once I realized I was falling, there's that moment of, I think the rope's going to catch me, and then you realize, okay, it's not going to catch me, and I'm now falling. And so I pushed off the rock to kind of look where I was going to, and what I could see was the rocks and the talus that I had left. And so as I was falling, I began to tip over kind of sideways and coming down horizontally. And so about 20 feet from the ground, there was a dead tree that I had actually walked around that tree to get to the climb. And the tree hit me in the head, hit me on the side of the head here, stood me back up, and I landed standing in the talus blocks. And talus blocks, for your listeners, are rocks from the size of a dishwasher to the size of a cinder block, but I mean, they're rocks. And hit that standing up, and it exploded both of my feet. I had compound fractures of both tibias and my heels on both legs.
Oh, wow.
Shattered my back at L2, which is kind of right through your belly button. Broke my ribs on my right side, my elbow, my shoulder, punctured my lung, broke my neck at C6. And then it just kind of crumpled me down into those talus blocks I laid kind of almost where I started from. And where I had the compound fractures on my legs, I'd also severed the artery in my right leg. So I was bleeding a lot. And my partner was about probably 10 feet from me. And he ran over, realized how badly I was hurt. He tried to stop the flow of blood that was coming out of my legs with some tourniquets. And then I was awake. So we, at that point, tried to make a plan like, okay, how do we get out of here now? Because we were about 4 miles in the backcountry. So we were pretty far back, and we had to figure out how to get me out of there.
Well, wait a minute. So you're conscious this whole time, and now you're trying to develop a strategy? Yeah. How can that even happen?
I don't know that I was the best person to be coming up with a plan at that point, but he kept his head. I credit him so much with just keeping his head in this heavy trauma situation. And what we decided was he would take off and go to the truck, drive into town. It took us about 45 minutes to walk in there. So then drive into town, that's another, I don't know, 20 minutes. So you're looking at probably well over 2 hours until he was going to get back to me. And with the amount of blood that I was losing, he knew, I mean, not a good chance of me surviving. So when he took off to go, he thought, I'm going to make him as comfortable as I can. I figured that's what we were doing. But he got about 10 feet from me, or 20 feet, and he remembered that he had his cell phone with him and came back and called, turned his phone on. He had never had a cell phone with him, and he had one that day and got a signal, got 911 right away. 911 put him through to Rocky Mountain Rescue, who was then connected to us and knew where we were. There was a climber working at that time. He knew where the climb was. He knew where we were. And we had just had this amazing string of miracles that kind of lined up to get me out of there as quickly as possible. It still took 5 hours, but at least it got me out of there quicker than most.
Okay, I hate to rush through all of this because, I mean, this sounds like another version almost of 127 hours where you're racing against a clock and you're there in a terrible state of affairs, and he could very well be freaking out, trying to figure out what to do, waiting, and all the rest. So what, you're obviously, we're talking to you, you seem okay now, but you did lose a leg, right?
I did. I ended up having to have my back fused. My lumbar spine is fused for 4 levels. My neck is fused on its own. And then I ended up having to amputate my right leg below the knee about 6 inches. It just never healed. And basically, I developed a nerve disorder at that same time. And they said, look, you know, we may be able to get above it with amputation. And if you do amputate, you actually will have one foot that actually works. So my prosthetic leg ends up becoming my good leg because my other foot, we took the hardware out of, but it's creaky and it doesn't work so great. So my amputation ended up being a great thing for me. Well,
okay, let's fast forward. You have founded the book is After the Fall. You've got After the Fall Ministries as well.
Yes.
What has happened to cause all of this since your fall? What's a sequence?
Kind of what happened was once I amputated my leg, I was trying to decide, do I want to go back to climbing or not? And it was cool to see the people God put in my life. It was the right people at the right time to say to me the right things, to say, okay, if you go back to climbing, here's what it'll look like. Here's what you can do with the prosthetic. And I started to get education is really what it came down to. And so I decided, well, when I went back to climbing, I wanted to see how far I could push it. And so I went back and started to climb to the same levels I was at, and went back and did some things in Yosemite, some speed records there, and then started to...
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
It is. I mean, it's amazing how God has kind of lined things up for us. It was me going, the first time I climbed El Capitan in Yosemite, it took me 6 days. When I went back as an amputee, I was the first amputee to climb it in under a day. So we did it in 13 hours.
Wow.
And so you realize, okay, God puts these amazing people in your life that help you to do these things. And I wanted to just then go back and help people if I could. And so what I started to do is talk to groups and talk to trauma victims and churches and businesses just about overcoming and seeing what God has to do in your life, and just seeing that this plan is in place that you may not see every day, especially if you're in like heavy trauma or change, emotional trauma. We all go through stuff, and it's hard to see God in that, but I was able to now look back at it and go, oh man, right there's God, right there's God, right there's God. And it's cool to have someone come in and say, look, you're going to get through this. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy, but God will kind of be there and guide you through this.
And is that what After the Fall Ministries is all about?
That's what After the Fall Ministries is. It's become a speaking ministry for me. I'll go to talk, like I said, to hospitals, to churches, and they can find me. I'm easy to find online. I'm at craigdemartino.com, where they can kind of see what I talk about, where I am. They can also find out where the book After the Fall, where they can find that, which is at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And it'll just give them an idea of, okay, this is who he is, this is who he speaks to, and this is kind of where he's coming from. All
right, let me ask you, the people that you're talking to who are obviously in need of some sort of assistance, and it could be any number of things. I mean, if it's just they need to get over some problems mentally as far as overcoming self-confidence or whatever, it could be physical things. What would you say it is that you address the most? What is the key thing that you find connects with people who are going through tough times?
I think the biggest thing that they don't see, and this is something I didn't see when I was in it, is when you're in it, it feels like this is the rest of your life. You know, that today, the pain that you have, the the distress you're in is going to be the rest of your life. And what you realize after you go through something really bad is that it's not the rest of your life. It is literally sometimes just one day or an hour or a minute. When I was in the hospital dealing with all the pain and chronic pain that I deal with now even, I realized that it's not the rest of my life. It's a very small window actually, and that you move through those windows and you go on to something different. And so each sequence has an end, a beginning and an end, and then it goes on to something else. And I think people lose sight of that.
Wow, that's, you know what, I would urge people to read this, because clearly we've just summarized this way too short for what actually happened. After the Fall is the name of the book. Craig Demartino is a guest. After the Fall Ministries as well. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it, Craig.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. Okay, coming up, we're going to be talking to the founder and as well as a teacher at a new school called the Rogue Valley Classical Christian School. We're going to find out what they're doing there. Coming up on Focus Today.